like to start by saying that I've had the pleasure now of spending some time with your Prime Minister. This is a remarkable leader, and you are very fortunate to have him at this moment. He has the energy, he has the commitment, he has a real sense of purpose, he's a good mind, and most important of all, he's got a good heart. Obviously, I'm very jealous of his youth, but I'd just like you to know that I was young once. But if the future of Ethiopia is in your hands, sir, I'm confident about its future. And if the future of Africa is in the hands of leaders like you, I'm confident for the future of Africa too. I want to say something to you also, as someone who was Prime Minister for 10 years. You can't do it on your own. He needs your help as well. He needs your help, he needs your understanding. He needs your support, not just when things are beginning, but when you get into the hard, tough business of government. And no country can ever succeed just by the efforts of one person alone. That person can set a tone and give leadership. But in the end, they need a group of leaders behind them who understand and have the same spirit and commitment and are prepared to help them deliver the change that is necessary. Now, I love this country of Ethiopia. We've been very proud to work here these last years. As the Prime Minister was saying, when I was in government, we made Africa a priority. We set up the International Development Department. We increased by 12 times our support specifically to Ethiopia and tripled the overall budget for aid. But I also became convinced over time, which is the reason I set up the Institute after leaving office, that aid has its part to play, yes. But in the end, the destiny of a country lies in its own hands. And outsiders can come and help and support and give advice and assistance, but in the end, what you do, how you succeed, will determine the future of Ethiopia. So what can I tell you that I have learned in my time as Prime Minister and then my time after being Prime Minister? And by the way, one thing I have learned is that you should never stop learning. I mean, it's sometimes one of the things that's very strange about being a Prime Minister is that you come into it and you're very new to the job. So after I've been Prime Minister for about a year, I said to my people, look, I'd like to go out and explain to the public very honestly that I'm kind of learning here. They said, you can't say that, they're going to panic. So in a way, you can never admit what is obviously true, is that all the time you're absorbing information, but you're also gaining experience. And so the experience I'd like to impart to you today is not just from my own time as Prime Minister of the UK, but is also in the work my institute has done in this last decade, now in some 14 different countries in Africa. The context for the world today is this: the chief characteristic of the world in the time we live in is the scope and the scale and the speed of change. Everything is changing. Changing the way we live, the way we work, the way we think, the way we interact with each other. And this process of global change is being driven by the decisions of billions of people. But what it's doing is creating a situation where, as the world accelerates in its change, so it challenges countries, communities, citizens also to change. Because if the world is changing around you, you are standing still, you get left behind. So, what is important is to realize that change is the hardest thing to do. But if I'm right in saying the real characteristic of today's world is change, it may be the hardest thing to do, but it's also the most necessary thing. And the question for leaders, and I don't just mean prime ministers, I mean leaders in whatever walk of life. And by the way, one of the things I have also learned is that the qualities of leadership are the same whether you're running a country, a corporation, a football team, or a community center. So I want to share what I've identified as 7 different lessons of leadership. And these are born partly of experience of my own, but partly watching what happens to others. But all of them are within the context of this process of change. Number 1, education, knowledge. The human capital of a country today will determine its success. So any country that is not investing in its people, helping them broaden their horizons, gain more knowledge, is a country that's wasting its most principal asset. Everything else is mobile. You can import the capital. You can see the technology. But education and knowledge, these are the things that allow people to develop a sense of ambition. You know, all of you, and certainly myself, I know how lucky I was to get the opportunity at some point in my life to broaden my horizons, to understand what I could do, to see my own potential. But think of the millions of people here in this country who never get the chance to do that, who never get the ability to understand what they could do if they had the opportunity. So, number 1 lesson, knowledge broadens horizons, gives ambition, leads to opportunity. Number 2, knowledge is useless unless it comes with an open mind. You know, I sometimes think the biggest political distinction in the world today is not so much some of the Western distinctions of left and right. It's the difference between the open mind and the closed mind. The open mind is the key to the future. The closed mind is what bars the door. An open mind means being open to new ideas, to being creative, to being innovative. If the world's changing fast, then you've got to be absorbing new ideas that allow you to change with it, to make the most of the opportunities, to prepare for the risks. And those changes will all be accelerated through technology. I just came back from China recently, and there's a country that underwent a huge process of change. And why did China undergo this process of change? Because it opened up. Because a group of political leaders decided that the time had come for China to take its place as the most populous country in the world as a global leader, economically and politically. And how did they do it? They did it by opening up. They did it by rejecting the closed mind and embracing new ideas and new thinking. And technology today gives us the opportunity to bypass many of the problems of the past. So when we think about technology, we should be thinking all the time, not just what it can do for us, but what it can do for your healthcare system, your education system, how it can improve the processes of government, how you use technological change to create a better environment for business, for citizens, for public services, for the world. So if you look at, for example, what the Chinese today are doing on artificial intelligence, very soon they will equal, maybe even surpass America in the development of it. But they've only been able to do that because they embraced the open mind. So that's the second thing. Open to new ideas. But also, third thing, open-minded towards other people. No country is ever going to succeed today if it is divided and scarred by divisions of race, ethnicity, religion, faith, culture. We can all have our different backgrounds, our different faiths, our different colors. But in the end, we are one people. And we should never be afraid of those that are different. And that openness to the other. To see in someone who's different, not a threat, but an opportunity to learn from them. This is what makes the world successful today. A few weeks ago, I was in Silicon Valley. It's a valley of migrants. They brought in the best minds from around the world. Do you think they would ever have created Silicon Valley if they'd said, no, you've got to be white, Anglo-Saxon, from a particular religious background? No, they threw the doors open and they attracted the best talent. And that openness to others is an essential part of creating a modern country. Great countries are never built on small minds. So prejudice of any sort is the enemy of progress. And it's often the easiest politics to play. I can't tell you the number of speakers I've seen and heard in the past, and I'm afraid in the present, and they will be there in the future, who get the easiest round of applause by attacking someone else. And ever since the first cavemen and women in the Stone Ages wanted to obscure what the real problems were and shift the blame onto someone else for solving them, they would go out the cave and say, you know what, those people over there are to blame. So it's the easiest thing to do, but it's the worst thing to do for the future. Fourth, as I went on as Prime Minister, I made a distinction. There were always two groups of people: the doers and the commentators. The doers do, and the commentators commentate. But in the end, it's only the doers that get things done. So the leader is not going to be afraid of criticism. If you're afraid of criticism, don't lead. A leader listens, of course, but that balance between listening and leading is essential. And the hardest thing about leadership is not saying yes, it's saying no. It's being prepared to stand up and say, I know you want this, and I wish that I could do it for you, but you know what? I can't for this moment or for that reason. The leader is prepared to take responsibility for taking decisions. And it's always tough. But if you want to be a doer, that's what you've got to do. Otherwise, you can be a critic. And there's one other thing I learned as well. Very important lesson, one of the first lessons you learn about politics. When you are listening, and you should listen, those who shout loudest don't necessarily deserve to be heard most. Okay? So that quality of leadership that is being prepared to step out when others step back, to take on your shoulders the mantle of responsibility, it's an onerous one, but I promise you this is a much more satisfactory one. The fifth is, though, important as well. In my experience, there are no great leaders without great teams around them. Build your team. Be prepared to stand with each other and for each other. You know, I always used to say to the people that I work with, you know, we have an open discussion, a frank discussion. You shouldn't be afraid to say what you think. In the end, we take the decision, we all implement it. But we stand with each other. And what you find is that the quality of people around you, obvious thing, is so important in whether you've got any opportunity to deliver what you want to achieve. So that quality of teamwork, of partnership, of genuinely being there for each other is an absolutely essential part of building a leadership that succeeds and not fails. And sixth, with great opportunity comes great responsibility. None of you would be sitting here today if you hadn't already come a long way, done something with your lives. I'm assuming that. I'm assuming that what we've got here is the leadership of the future for the country, or some of it. But you know, all of you will know that you didn't just get there by your own efforts and brilliance. Someone helped you. Maybe it was your family. Maybe it's your local community. Maybe it was a friend. Maybe it's someone you work for. Someone opened the door for you. Now, you had to go through the door, that's true, but someone opened it for you and gave you that opportunity. And now you've gone through that door and may go on to even higher things and better things. Don't forget the others, the ones that haven't had the opportunity, the ones that haven't made it, the ones that are still mired in poverty, lack of opportunity, poor education, absence of hope. The responsibility is to them, because the opportunity you had never just came by chance. It came because you were lucky enough, fortunate enough for someone else to help you get forward. And one thing I learned, not just from my own experience, but I've met in my time some of the most wealthy, successful people in the world. And I tell you this, most of them, not all of them, most of them will say to you, the most fulfilling thing that they have ever done is in the service of others. You talk to someone like Bill Gates, he'll tell you, yeah, he built a great company. But the thing that's given him most satisfaction in his life is actually what he's done since then. So don't just pull the ladder up behind you. Keep the ladder down. Put your arm down to lift others up with you. You have been the fortunate ones, but think of the unfortunate ones and do everything you can to help them. And finally, the Prime Minister used an important word when he spoke to you earlier, which is the word optimistic. Be optimistic. Optimism isn't about ignoring challenge, but it is about having the spirit of possibility at the forefront of your mind. And you see it here in Ethiopia. You look back over the last 30 years, think how far the country has come. Now, you're aware, of course, of all the challenges still to be met. But progress happens. And it happens because there are people who see the world as it is, imagine the world as it could be, and have the passion to make the vision of what it could be the reality of the future. So that passion is always born of an optimism. And I tell you, I went through difficult times as a prime minister, and now, as will be evident to you, I'm of the older generation, right? I've even got grandchildren. I mean, this is my children. They look at me now as if I'm sort of some ancient relic, but and I cannot tell you how distressing it was the first time I hear the words grandpa. But you get used to it, actually, and in fact, it's great fun. So I don't want to tell you that, but over all my time, I've never lost the sense of optimism. I'm still optimistic because I can see how the world's changed. I can see how Africa's changing today. I can see how Ethiopia's changed. I look at a country like Rwanda, where we work, that went through genocide 25 years ago, is now a country on its way to second world and hopefully in the end first world status. Just mention China. And it's an interesting thing. You can find two countries next door to each other. Same population, same opportunity, same potential. One succeeds, one fails. What's the difference? Quality of leadership. You look at what was created by Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, for example. The greatest experiment in governance that human history has ever known is the Korean Peninsula, North Korea, South Korea. South Korea back in the 1960s, same GDP per head as Sierra Leone. Today a first world country. But also if we look at Africa and we see step by step and stage by stage progress happening, the emergence of new leaders. There's lots to be optimistic about. So, my conclusion to you is this. It's a privilege to be in the position you're in. Actually, it's a privilege for the Prime Minister to be in his position today, and me to have been in mine. And I honestly believe that when you're given that chance to make a difference, there is a real duty to make it. And yes, it's about policy, and it's about devising strategy, and it's about implementation, but it is also about hope, about belief, about watching the progress of humanity over the centuries and realizing for all the problems, there's actually a lot to be thankful for, a lot to consider ourselves blessed for, and a lot to appreciate. So, as one older leader to all you younger leaders, it's a privilege. There's nothing better than being a leader. There's nothing harder, but there's nothing more fulfilling. And if you can keep throughout your life that spirit of the open mind and be the doer and not the critic, and be the one that's prepared to stand out and stand up and create change, then I promise you, when you look back on your lives, if you can even imagine getting to the ancient age that I am, you look back on your lives, for all the difficulties, you at least say, well, I tried to make a difference and I did my best for my country, my community, my friends, my family, the people I work with and live with. This is our ambition and this is our hope. And you are the people that will make that difference. So do it with the passion, the optimism, and do it with excitement, because by the way, it can also be done. Thank you very much.